this should be a great presentation. The Carr China Company, as you are able to see on the table, is many beautiful examples. One thing that's always been very near and dear to my heart is collecting antiques. There's one person, I think, in this world that loves it as much as I do, and he has spent his life studying it. I've always said that there is education and there's no substitution for it, with the exception, if you've got the education and you spend most of your life still loving it and collecting and documenting it and just basically loving it. I've never seen anybody love artifacts any more than our presenter this evening. And it is now my pleasure to introduce to you a friend, a wonderful museum curator. His name is Jim Mitchell. Make him welcome.
Thank you, Bob. I think I'm going to start out by telling you a story. One of the things that, as Bob was talking about antiques, I'm tempted always to say, at the turn of the century. Well, I have to start saying at the turn of the 20th century. If I use the shorthand, you all would understand what I meant, but at the turn of the 20th century. At the turn of the 20th century, several municipalities in West Virginia had a really good economic development idea, but they didn't call it that. They had the idea that if they brought an industry to town, they could sell house lots to the workers. They tried it in Morgantown, they tried it in Grafton, they tried it in Huntington. They had varying success. In Morgantown, they established a glass factory, and they hired a bunch of Germans, and they formed Seneca Glass. And they proceeded to make beautiful, beautiful cut stemware well into the 80s, 70s and 80s. In Huntington, a group started a pottery. They called it the Huntington China Company, and they somehow didn't have their act together, and after about 4 years, they failed. The assets were bought by a young man named Harry Wiley from East Liverpool, and he ran the pottery successfully until the 30s. I'm not quite sure what happened. I don't know whether the Depression got him mentally, because he seems to have died at the same time the pottery died. And he made probably the cheapest dime store ware any of us have ever seen. We see very few pieces of Wiley pottery that don't have cracks and chips. And the only real nice piece that you can see is downstairs in the museum in the craft cases. We have a couple of nice pieces of Wiley. In Grafton, they tried the same thing. Unfortunately, my knowledge is a little shy as to what that pottery was, but it was a pottery. They lasted 4 years, and they failed. In Huntington, in Wheeling at the same time, the Warwick China Company was being operated by Thomas Carr. Thomas Carr is a famous American potter. His father was James Carr of New York City. The New York City pottery came from England in the 1840s and 50s, thinking he could get all these Americans and teach them how to make pottery. And he discovered he had to train them practically up from the cradle. He was successful. He won medals at the Centennial Exposition in 1876 and in Paris in 1878. He trained his son, and his son landed this position at Warwick China Company in Wheeling, and lived there, worked there, married, and he had 2 daughters. Each daughter married a young, successful, upper-class Wheeling fellow, one named Speidel and one named Bachman. In 1916, when the enterprise in Grafton failed, the boys got together and said, hey, let's convince the old man that we ought to buy the assets to that pottery, and they did. And Thomas Carr agreed to leave Warwick and take over what was the Carr China Company. And he was the superintendent there for 10 years, from 1916 to 1926, when he retired and went somewhere on retirement. Some people say Colorado, some people say New England. I'm not sure where he went. And there aren't any descendants of the pottery around to talk to. The Bachmans eventually bought out the Spidels, so it was just the Bachmans. And the president after him was his daughter, Edith Carr Bachman. And she was the president for some years, and then her son, Wheeler Carr Bachman, took over, and he operated the pottery until it closed in 1953. It closed because the accountants said, gentlemen, if you stay open, we're all going to lose our shirt. So they closed. Grafton didn't like it. West Virginia didn't like it. The workers didn't like it. But the guys who had the money in the pottery walked away with their money. They didn't lose it at the time of the Great Depression. Wheeler's wife was Joy Schaefer Bachman from Pennsylvania. She made it her life's work to attempt to preserve the memory of the Carr China Company. And she collected china. She had an ace in the hole that nobody else did. She owned the decorating cylinders, and you're looking at them. And this is only a small part of the group that she had. She had 360 decorating cylinders and 592 pieces of china, which she offered to us in 1992. But she offered it to us with a condition that we put it on display indefinitely. And we don't do that. No museum in America does that. Well, no modern museum. And they asked me if I would put my stand in writing. So I wrote them a letter and I told them what our conditions were for our accepting the gift. Our conditions were no conditions. So they went their merry way and I kept chugging along here. In about 2003, I got a phone call from one of Joy's sisters. Those names slip my mind at the moment. Some things in this talk I don't write down. I'm talking from the things. You'll notice I have labels on the cylinders. Those are so I can tell you what they are because they're awfully hard to remember all those patterns when I've got so many of them in my head. And they asked me if we were still interested in the collection, and I said yes, we were. They said, under what conditions? I said, you have my letter? They said, oh yes, we have your letter. I said, those are our conditions. So they invited me up to the house. They said, would you like to see the things again? And I said, yes. They said, well, next Thursday, Joy is going out to have her hair done. She is paranoid, and she has Alzheimer's. So we're going to sneak you in when she goes out. So he snuck me in, and I looked the place over, and I knew what I wanted. I knew it was there, and I said, what happened to the cylinders? I'd seen the cylinders in '92, and they said, oh, we put them all in storage in Wheeling. In Morgantown, at the Morgantown Airport. So I said, yes, I'm interested. They said, well, when something happens, mostly meaning that when Joy died, they call me, and they did. And we accepted the collection. Well, in this agency, sometimes there aren't a great many backs to do the work. Lots of us do a lot more than our job description calls for. So one day in July of 2005, I rented a U-Haul van, and I drove to Morgantown and met the ladies to pick up the cylinders. I didn't have anybody from here to go with me, so I took somebody with me important. I took my wife. And we discovered the cylinders were in ware boxes, and a ware box holds 5 of these cylinders. It is impossible to pick up one of those ware boxes with these cylinders. So we unloaded the boxes, put the boxes in the truck, and then loaded the cylinders up again. In the process of doing it, we decided to save on space a little bit, and we put 2 cylinders in that step well on the right side of the van. And we drove back to Charleston. 156 miles of cling, 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 cling. It was like carrying a cargo of bells. We came home. It was after hours. Only the maintenance supervisor was here. A couple other guys bugged out, wouldn't help us unload. So Johanna and I and Gary Atkins unloaded. That was the first load. The second load, we did the same thing, and we brought the cylinders here. They were dirty. These aren't. They were put in a storeroom. I've since moved them about 3 times. Every time I move them, I get dirty, but they get cleaner. And they're quite clean now because everything that I'm using tonight, we gave a bath to. I also have numbered and cataloged all 35 of them, so I can tell what they are. Believe me, it's hard to keep track which is which. Then we discovered in loading the cylinders that there were a few cylinders marked Warwick China. And I said, what's with these Warwick China cylinders? And they said, oh, we don't know, but there seem to be some Warwick China cylinders along with a car. I thought, oh, that's nice. So after I had the collection here, I called my friend Susan Myers, who's the retired curator of ceramics and glass at the Smithsonian. And I said, Susan, in your vast knowledge of American museums and of American ceramics, could you tell me what museum in the United States has any decorating cylinders from any American pottery? And she said, none. I said, oh. And she said, you're going to take the Carr collection, aren't you? And I said, darn right, I'm going to take the Carr collection. Well, as I was handling some of the papers, or actually a note on one of these plates, the note says, in 1951, when Warwick went under, we bought the Warwick cylinders. So I discovered in cataloging last summer, in the months of August and September and early October, I cataloged all 692 pieces of Carr China. I did the China first because I figured that way I could learn something about the decoration. And it's a single space page, and there are about, totally, there are 100 different patterns. We have ware from 66 patterns. Some of them are very difficult to tell which is which. I'm sorry to emphasize that so much, but it's not been an easy subject to handle. And when I decided to do this talk, I thought, I'll take the easy way out and I'll pull the cylinders that I know. Well, we discovered that the cylinders, many of the Carr cylinders have the name of the pattern on. The Warwick cylinders do not. And thanks to Joy, we had a Warwick catalog and 2 Carr catalogs. And I've been able to identify the patterns based on those catalogs. In the process, some of the patterns are just numbers. So I've done what antiquarians have done for generations. I've chosen to name the patterns. However, my pattern names say Pennsylvania, parentheses, JRM. So in the future, they'll know who to blame for my naming the patterns. And I've done a few of them that way. When they acquired the cylinders in '51, I think they weren't very wealthy in cylinders at Carr. I think they were very happy to get these Warwick cylinders because they started using them practically immediately. If they had gone on after '53, we would have seen the amalgamation of all of the Warwick cylinders into Carr's production. Let me go back a little bit and tell you a little bit what the cylinders really are. From 1973 to 1976 in Niagara Falls, New York, there was a wonderful little museum called the Carborundum Museum of Ceramics. It exhibited and taught about the history of pottery, porcelain, glass, and other sorts of ceramic materials in the whole world from 10,000 BC to the present. I had the good fortune to be the curator of that museum for its entire life. In the process of trying to teach about how bone china was made, because from 1966 to 1977, the Carborundum Company of Niagara Falls, New York, owned Spode Limited. So we had Spode workmen in Niagara Falls who worked in English manners, and we produced bone china for people watched us do it. And then we sold the things in our gift shop. That pottery used flat copper plates. Now you notice these cylinders are silvery. They're actually copper, and they're chrome-plated. Excuse me. They're chrome-plated to protect the detail on the copper. What they didn't realize when they chrome-plated them was they made them indestructible. They also preserved them for posterity. And anybody comes in right now and wants to rob the place and take all these cylinders, everybody pick up a cylinder, and when the thief comes near you, just hit him in the head with it. They all weigh between 12 and 16 pounds. They're not light. Well, the way we did it at Carborundum is that we had flat plates, and the plate was inked with a gooey, sticky printing ink and put on with a brayer, and then it was cleaned off with a steel edge, and that left the ink only in the decoration. Then on top of the plate was put a piece of rice paper, and they ran it through a hand press. They didn't rotate the cylinder. They had a cylinder that impressed the rice paper into the plate. Then they peeled it off, cleaned up the plate with gasoline or some other solvent. It wasn't gasoline because they did it in-house, and re-inked it and did it again. Well, they passed the rice paper along to the decorator, and they cut the rice paper up, not with a pair of scissors, but by laying the paper on a Lazy Susan, and they had a little cutter that was just a tiny wheel, like a glass cutter, and they pushed that around and maneuvered the Lazy Susan, like this, that problem. And then they took the pieces and they very carefully placed them on, and they just pushed them on, and the glue glued into the mucilage that the piece was sized with, and then they took soft soap, water, and a sponge, and they sponged off the rice paper, set the piece aside to dry, and then fired it. This method puts the cylinder in a press. It is inked in the press and then skinned with some sort of steel edge, and then the rice paper, it runs across on a platen and picks up the ink from the cylinders. It's an English method. These are English potteries. The Carborundum pottery was English, so was Warwick, so was Carr. Don't get me going about how to tell German from English. That's another lecture, and we'll do that someday too. The ware on this side of the room is Carr. The ware on this side of the room is Warwick. Well, almost. And one of the things I've learned recently is that a Carr cylinder has a long ridge in it. And it would have, if I'd known this before, it would have been easy selecting them. A Warwick cylinder has a slug in it. You have a slug like this in. And if you look into the cylinders, you discover that they give the company name, the pattern name, and then a number that says 2005-31 point, somewhere up in the 700s. And that's the catalog number, because these are all catalog objects. Each piece of china with the cylinder was made from the cylinder, and in a variety of colors. We have funny things. This pattern here, this is Warwick's pattern that I call Chinoiserie. It's one of those Chinoiserie JRM patterns. They never had a name for it, but it's a Chinese-looking pattern. You know what Chinoiserie means? It's Chinese stuff the way we think the Chinese ought to have done it. They didn't necessarily do it that way, but that's what we say. So, and then this pattern, this one is Edith. Edith, for Edith Carr Bachman, obviously. The next one, I've had fun when I cataloged it. I asked various staff members, who lived in Mount Vernon? Washington, right? Who lived in Monticello? Okay, who lived in Ashland? James Monroe. Who lived in Hyde Park? Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Who lived in Sycamore Hill? Teddy. Okay. Hyde Park. Obviously, they named patterns after things that were going on in life. Do you suppose Her Majesty the Queen would like the Windsor pattern? This is Windsor. Right next to Windsor, we have onion. And onion is funny. This is one of the oldest china patterns known. This pattern was invented at Meissen in about 1730. It's a German pattern, and it's been reproduced, and I can point out about 4 potteries in America that have made this pattern. But this is, and it's always called blue onion. Right, blue onion. Well, at Carr, we have also got green onion, pink onion, My colleague Matt Boggess says gold onion and brown onion. So they made onion. Actually, they made it the way the salesman sold it to the restaurant. Remember, this is restaurant ware. This isn't fine china. This is hotel ware. One of the reasons why not much of it survives is because it got busted up in use. It wasn't unbreakable. It's interesting the number of pottery and glass factories that have gone out of business because they try to make unbreakable ware. It's stupid. You can't sell replacements to the people. And then some patterns, you don't know why they're called that. This is Empire. Why, we don't know. Oh, and on the back of it, it has a very rare Carr China paper label. Probably the only one in the collection. You notice on many of the pieces of ware, there are little notes. Those are Joy Bachman's notes. I've written down everything that was on them and put in the cataloging record, but in many instances, the tape held up pretty well, so I just left them on the ware. This is Irwin. Why? Right on the back it says Irwin, Carr China. The mark usually says the name of the pattern, Carr China, and Grafton, WVA. A cylinder, let's see what's the easiest way to do this. My friend, the cylinder. The cylinder has a number of pieces, well, I call them pieces. These are pieces of decoration. On the cylinder also tells what the piece was supposed to go on. You see, they didn't stretch the stuff. They put it on perfectly and neatly. Americans expected things to be done well. The way we antiquarians tell old transfer printed ware is by the fact there's joints in the transfer printing. That's because they took a 10-inch plate, 10-inch plate cylinder, and took those pieces and put them on 7-inch plates, 16-inch plates. They didn't fit, so they stretched them, they patched them. When you're looking at those old pieces of transfer printing, you're looking at things that are pre-Civil War. But this is what the pieces look like. Sometimes it's easy for me to walk around with them. And they shine, so they're hard to see sometimes. How about back there? Okay. Now, where'd I get it from? Now, when I did this, when I was working the talk-up, I had the fun of made up a bunch of labels. And I thought, hey, that'd be fun. People can tell what they are, but I can show what they are that way. Okay, this is Antoine's Lubots. It says New Orleans. Actually, it's short for New Orleans. And this is the devil on a hot flame. You know why it's so hot is because he's eaten too many peppers. The next piece is, the pattern is called West Virginia State Parks. That's the little cup and saucer on ware that they called Glo-Tan. Glo-Tan. The body is what is the pottery, and the white pottery doesn't have a name, except the Glo-Tan does, because it's different. The next one is Jackson's Mill. That's the, there's still some of that ware in use at Jackson's Mill today, but they made it, and so did McNichol, J.E. McNichol and Sons. They always say of Clarksburg, actually of Stonewood. Okay, excuse me, no, you're all right. I just bumble along. The next one is Elwood, Majestic. Oh, and then there's Marine. If I was going to collect Carr China, I'd get on eBay and see if I could buy any Marine, because this is truly pretty. There's a 3-masted sailing ship. Somebody pointed out before 6 o'clock that that's the Santa Maria, and perhaps it is. It always looks to me like it's Long Island behind it, but because it's one of those unfortunate places that's flat. And then back there, there's the picture with that black coat of arms is Pennsylvania. And it's Pennsylvania because the cylinder, I don't know what the Greek key on the cylinder is really yet. I'll find that out. but on the cylinder are a number of pieces of coats of arms of a single shape, and it's Pennsylvania's arms. And if they print it in black, of course, Pennsylvania's arms are supported by 2 black horses. So that was obviously made for a Pennsylvania institution. So we sold our ware in Pennsylvania. The next one is Blue Willow. I hearken back to Homer Laughlin, who made it a point of saying, it's willow ware, not blue willow. Well, we called it Blue Willow. And unfortunately, we don't own a piece of Carr's Blue Willow. So the piece that's sitting there is a piece of English earthenware. A piece of English earthenware. Belongs to the collection. The next piece is Virginia. Why this is Virginia, I don't know. Maybe those are the waves that they first saw when they came to Jamestown in 1607. The next one is called Madeline, and it's more waves. The collection has a number of unique things in it because what Joy had at her fingertips besides the cylinder was the factory collection. So she had the factory samples, the standard samples that they made ware according to, and then the things that guys played with. So this is Madeline around the edge and Princess in the middle. So it's sitting here because this is Princess. This is Princess. Would the Princess like it? I don't know. Well, speaking of princesses, that's like that wonderful Morgantown story. Morgantown Glassware Guild had a dog pattern that just didn't sell. It was not a nice pattern. And nobody liked it. It had nothing to it. Who should come to the glass factory, but the First Lady. And Jacqueline Kennedy loved it. So they renamed it the President's House. It was in the White House, and we all have it, and we look at it and say, oh, it's President's House, and it's got this nice association, this neat history, but basically it's not a very desirable looking piece of glass. This cup is Madeline underneath, Virginia on top, and Princess inside. And it sits there. This is Sylvia. Sylvia is just a lot of leaves. I won't sing to you about who is Sylvia, what is she. The Shakespeare, this goofy looking flowers is Sylvia. This next one is called Checker. And again, this is one of those funny idiosyncrasies. We have a checker cylinder, and the catalog shows checker. And when we went digging around the collection, we found this nice little creamer. It obviously has checker on it. Oh my God, it's got a Warwick backstamp. So it's a Warwick backstamp on a cylinder because of its ridge is obviously Carr. Don't ask me. No, you can ask me. It's like I called Dean Six up last year. I said, you know, Dean, I've got a number of questions to ask. Could you tell me if there's an expert on Carr China? And he said, yes, Jim, I can tell you, there's an expert. I said, oh, good. Can you give me his name and telephone number? He said, yep, his name is you. I said, oh, thanks. The next pattern is Esquire. I think it's one of these pretty classical patterns. Carr didn't make so many neoclassical patterns, but Warwick made a lot of them, mostly because I think they were making ware earlier on. When we found the Revere cylinder, we thought, we didn't remember we had a piece of Revere. Then when we were looking for the pieces, we discovered the Revere plate in Glo-Tan, and we said, well, we better go wash the Revere cylinder. The same thing happened with plaid. Plaid is associated with that Antoine's Lubat over there. It's on the same cylinder. I don't know but what that Lubat's is a New Orleans restaurant, and maybe that they used plaid with it because the backstamps indicate plaid and Lubat together. And last but not least, a very nice pattern Unfortunately, we only own one plate of it, and I know why we only have one plate of it, because you all have the rest. This is Charleston, and it's not a bad-looking pattern. Now, that runs us up to the rest of the cylinders, and the rest of the cylinders are Warwick. Warwick cylinders are all numbers. This is Warwick 620 and 4059 together. It's the same decoration, but it's colored differently. The next one is Warwick 6174, and it's called Urns, Coins, and Swags, JRM. The next one is the Vinoy Park Hotel. Joy told me that they, when Warwick went out of business, they had a large order from the Vinoy Park Hotel to replace their china. And the first cylinder that came to Carr was to make Vinoy Park Hotel china. So it's a Warwick cylinder, and the dishes are from Carr. The next piece is a pattern that's called Tudor Rose. Why, I don't know. Because it's a pattern that's practically a direct copy of something like Blue Willow. It's very much a mid-19th century English pattern. And I don't know if Warwick was trying to do the same thing that Spode did. Spode made ware that copied Chinese export porcelain. When your Chinese export porcelain services got beaten up too much by the help, and you needed replacements and you couldn't get them from China, you got them from England. Spode made them. One time, Copeland and Thompson wrote, Spode wrote to Copeland and Thompson in New York. Copeland and Thompson was Spode's sales agent, and said, tell us the patterns that are popular in America. And they wrote back and said, one of the popular patterns is Fitzhugh. Now, we all think Fitzhugh is an English pattern. Turns out that's what Americans called that pattern. That's that pattern that's Chinese around the edge and has quadrants of decoration in it. It's called Fitzhugh. One thing that's interesting about this Tudor Rose pattern, it's one of the few places where I can show it to you. Spode made two different kinds of ware, and so did Warwick. I don't know about Warwick, but this, see that lumpy edge? That's called RE. That's rolled edge. Rolled edge. This is restaurant ware. This, if you toss it on the floor, might bounce. Might. I don't advise trying it, but might. This is called banquet ware. No rolled edge, much thinner. This is ware that was either sold to very ritzy restaurants or sold for home use. Everybody was trying to get into the fine china market. Right up the road, they had Seneca. Seneca was making the glass. The girls in the 20s were buying Spode and Wedgwood, but they were serving it and drinking out of Seneca. Seneca made the best cut stemware in the world, and there was no point buying it from anywhere else. And of course, then there's that guy. I always thought that when I lived in Madison, Wisconsin as a kid, I would go to the china stores and see the china, and around the top of the room, they had the name of all these Royal Dalton, Spode, Wedgwood, Lennox. For years, I thought Lennox was a Scottish pottery. Well, if you read my resume, I served 5 years as the curator of decorative arts at New Jersey State Museum. And I know that Lennox China Company is called Lennox because the guy who owned it originally was Walter Scott Lennox, who was born in New Jersey, who learned his trade at Willett's Manufacturing Company. No, learned his trade at Otten Brewer, and then supervised Willett's, and eventually went into business with a guy named Cox to form Ceramic Art Company, which then became Lennox. And they made the best china. They made the best china. And during the years that in the heyday in the teens, Walter Scott Lennox was the final inspector. And he had a table next to an open window, and the open window, the next wall over was brick, and 2 stories down was a concrete floor. And he looked at it, If there was anything wrong with it, he didn't mark it for repair. He just went, out the window it went. Crash. When he went to lunch at noon, a guy came with a push broom and swept up all the pieces, and they went to the landfill. They sold no seconds. And they maintained that they could hold their share of the market without selling seconds. When the crash came in '29, Lenox eventually got down to 1 day every 2 weeks. But they still made ware for the people who could afford it, that the crash didn't affect. The next one is Maythorn. Why? I don't know. And the next one is John R. Thompson, whom I've never heard of. Yeah, the back stamp is fun because the back stamp says, Carr China made especially, please notice, they didn't understand that it isn't a word, made especially for John R. Thompson Company. And it has the decoration and Thompson's mark right in it. Who he was, I haven't learned yet. I'll learn someday. I don't know yet. Now those six, the first one you heard me talk about, Chinoiserie, 61, 67. The next one is Dutch Inn, the Dutch Inn. And this was, says Warwick Albert Pick and Company. If you ever see China that says Albert Pick on the back, he was a distributor in Chicago. That's Albert Pick. The next one is Warwick's 4018 4018, which I call half flower, because it's got half flowers. They're not full flower, and they're stylized besides. The next one is 6182, which is called Daisies and Curves, because it looks like daisies and curves. And then there's Warwick 6187, which is called Five White Fingers. Five White Fingers, because there's a little thingamajig on it that has 5 white fingers. Not on the cylinder, they look like 5 black fingers, but on the wearer, there's 5 white fingers. And the last but not least is Warwick Vase. This is Warwick. I think this is one of the prettiest patterns. Also, this is that same idea. This is a mid-19th century English Staffordshire plate with this thing in the middle. So that's, let's see, what have I forgotten? Oh yeah, I have to show you these. When we acquired the collection, we acquired their show signs too, Carr China, vitrified hotel ware, Carr China, Grafton, West Virginia. And then in 1946, they must have been really proud of themselves because they made this up. This was for the staff party on December 17th, 1946. It has the signature of 22 people. And I wonder if this was all 22 people who worked in the pottery. Maybe there were only 22 people in the pottery. We ran the Carborundum factory, which was very small with 13 or 14. They had 22. I think these were the big shots. I think there are a lot of carry boys, a lot of decorators, a lot of transferers, a lot of broom men and gantry men and stuff like that didn't make it to the staff party. This was the staff, not the line, the staff. And there's a wonderful photograph of this party. So we have the photograph, but unfortunately, the photograph isn't keyed to the name, so I can't tell which is which. These other 3 pieces are interesting because they show up in the catalog. This is the color chart of Carr China Company, probably about 1934. They have numbers, 1, 2, 6, 8, 15, 18, etc. But the names are fun. Olive green, blue green, black, French green, royal blue, Canton green, chestnut brown, crimson. Please notice it wasn't red, it was crimson. Deep yellow, golden brown, Victoria green, cloister brown, not mud, not chocolate, but cloister brown, purple, old gold, and ultra blue. Just think, they named something old gold, and it is kind of goldy. Some guys up country realize, what are the colors? Blue and old gold. There's old gold. This one has the numbers on it too, but no names. No telling what that one was. And this one is the other one. This is purples and blues. Oh, these are written on the back. Oh, and these came from Croxall. That's interesting. Croxall. Croxall was our color supplier in East Liverpool, Ohio. Croxall, C-R-O-X-A-L-L. But they only have numbers, so can't tell them either. Then this plate is interesting. I bought this plate when I first came here in 1990 because I was in an antique shop and I saw it and I thought, oh, a color sample plate. Color sample plates are really, 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 really rare. And this one says, Charles W. Harrison, 612 Broad, East Liverpool, Ohio, #1. But guess what else it says? It's got a knight's head on the back, and underneath that it says Warwick. It's a Warwick plate, made using his colors to show what his colors look like, probably as a test piece that went to Croxall and it went to Charles W. Harrison and said, well, this is the way your colors fire for us. Now we want to buy 79 pounds of 1308. We want to buy 500 pounds of 174. We want to buy 2 tons of 1045. And why don't you make green? Anyway, this cup, there are a few personalized things in the collection. This cup says on it, Wheeler Carr Bachman. And I brought it up for fun. It was made in 1942. Carr China is dated, the last 2 digits of the year, and then A, B, C, or D, and that just stands for the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter. D does not stand for December, it stands for October, November, and December. What else? What you aren't seeing here are 2 of the great prizes in the collection, and that is that the factory made a set for Edith on her 25th anniversary of presidency of the company. It's a beautiful set, and she used it and used it and used it, and it was so huge that some pieces survived. We must own about 40 pieces of that set. She also, and it was made in Rho-Dendra. In pink Rho-Dendra. Rho-Dendra. See, people really do understand who they are. They knew who they were and where they were, Rho-Dendra. Then, for when Wheeler Carr Bachman was the president, they made blue Rho-Dendra for him, and we've got a good lump of that as well. In 1916, 1936, 1941. In 1941, they had a 25th anniversary, and they made a 25th anniversary plate, and we have a few of those. Now, they also made the press release said that I was going to show you the Tygart Dam plate. I can't do that because I don't have the cylinder for the plate. We have the plates, but as yet, and in packing the cylinders, I don't remember ever stumbling across the Tygart Dam cylinder. Many times, private order cylinders stayed with the person who ordered it. That's true with the International Mother's Day Shrine in Grafton. Those cylinders are in Andrews Methodist Church, the shrine itself. They've kept those, they own those cylinders. As some cylinders got away, Joy's notes castigate several potteries that borrowed their cylinders and they wouldn't give them back. But all that sort of thing is just the way of business, you know. And the unfortunate thing for us and for Joy too was that those places went out of business and their cylinders went to the scrap heap. And they didn't come back to Joy and then ultimately to us. Well, 50 minutes. How do you like that? That's a pretty long sermon. I bet your father doesn't preach that long. My grandson. Any questions? I answer all the questions before go ahead.
Just, you explain it, I can understand. How do you get this pattern onto here?
Oh, that's how it's printed onto rice paper.
So they take this pattern
and they ink it, and they roll it with a press, and they press it onto very thin paper. And then they take that paper, then the plate is covered with glue. And then it's dry, it's still sticky. And then they cut out the pieces and they tap them down.
So they tamp the rice.
Yeah, they pat the rice paper with the glue, right, with the ink right on the glue. The ink goes into the glue. Then using soft soap and a sponge and water, the rice paper dissolves real easy, and they dissolve the paper off, leaving the decoration behind. And then they fire it in a kiln.
And they do that carefully, one piece at a time. This is not mass.
Yes, one piece at a time.
Wow.
Yeah. And in a factory that now at Carborundum, we gold decorated. So we had decorated pieces, and we also had gold edges, and that was fun to watch, because we had an English gilder. The museum had a very definite smell of its own. You walked in the front door and went, what's that nice smell? Well, that nice smell was aniseed oil. Aniseed oil. And aniseed oil was the medium that the gold was suspended in. But the oil was the smell was so powerful that it permeated the whole building. I mean, even with air conditioning, you couldn't get rid of the smell. Everything smelled like that. But when he had a little lazy Susan, a spinner that had a big axle that he could turn with his fingers, and he could turn it very slowly. And he would turn the plate, and it would spin around, and he would tap it so it was exactly centered. When it was exactly centered, he'd turn it, and then he had a rest in his arm, and he had the brush laden with gold, and he turned it with the brush on it all the way around, and then lifted off. So every gold stripe was one brush stroke. He never applied it more than once. Now, he of course made messes and stuff, and he had rags, and what do you do with rags that have gold in them? Well, you put them in a bucket. And every so often, the gold salesman comes by, and he says, you got a bucket for me? Yep, here's your bucket. So they give him the bucket. He gives you an empty bucket. He takes the bucket back to Newark, New Jersey is where the gold maker was from. And they take our bucket of rags and they dump it into a furnace. And they burn the rags off, the gold settles to the bottom, they take the gold out, they weigh how much the gold is, and then they credit us on our next order. So it's our gold. We don't lose the gold. And it's 22 karat gold. I don't know that Carr ever did that. I know that Warwick made some gilded wares. That's one of the things. The other thing is, I didn't bring a piece up. It's not real. It's not germane to what we're talking about. But porcelain. Well, I should start at the beginning. As far as we're concerned, we museum curators, antique collectors, users of ware, as far as we're concerned, porcelain and china are translucent. Pottery and earthenware are opaque. Glass is transparent. Transparent, translucent, opaque. In the ceramic business, they have different criteria for what is porcelain and china. And then they use the word vitrified. And every time I see the word vitrified, I laugh, because it's not really vitrified. Earthenware, whiteware, pottery isn't vitrified. Porcelain is vitrified. And because it's vitrified, the Chinese invented porcelain. They made porcelain out of feldspar and kaolin, feldspar and white china clay. And in the heat of the fire, the clay dissolves in the feldspar. The result is that you have a vitrified body that light shines through. Now, you can put a 5,000 watt searchlight on one of these, and light would never go through. It would blow up on you, but light wouldn't go through. This isn't vitrified, but vitrified is a word that they use to sell good ware. The funny thing is that so many potteries made semi-vit. Semi-vitrified is it's like being
semi-pregnant.
figure out any comparison. I won't figure out the obvious ones. You're either one or you're not the other. You're not, it can't be in between. There's no halfway in between. There's no such thing as semi-vitrified. So, but semi-vitrified ware is usually ware that isn't very good. Where was it going? Well, that was one place to go. That explains why. This is all opaque. No light goes through this at all. Is it durable? Probably not. Will it break if you drop it on the floor? Oh, yeah, it will. Do you want it to break? Well, not if you're using it, you want it to break, but does the pottery wants you to break it, because then they can sell you more stuff. That's the advantage of being in the pottery business. Yes?
Who did the designs?
I'm going to walk back there. I'm a little deaf. I can send pretty good, but I don't receive very well.
Did they have special people that created, like this one with Jackson's Mill, the design on it?
They probably made it from a photograph originally, and then cut it as a handmade piece. The cylinders are handmade. The guys who engraved the plates, and they're really engravers, are a little different from the guys who made glass molds. Iron glass molds are made with a little tappy, hammer and chisel. It takes a long time, and it takes a fair amount of time to make a plate. But and what amazes me is how much alike every single element is. They were very good at it, but these are also very expensive when they were made, and they take a while to make. Would they be usable today? Yes, they would. You could use these cylinders today if anybody wanted to. Unfortunately, they're in this West Virginia State Museum and they can't leave. So you know about can't leave. They can't leave. Once it's here forever. And you're in the only museum that has any decorating plates from any American pottery. And we have it from 2.
Would these be very expensive? If you were to get a set of dishes, how expensive would they have been? I mean, in the sort of
if you won
things. How expensive would this type of dishes be?
Oh, not real expensive. Not really expensive. The best comparison that I've ever heard, I heard from an executive at Homer Laughlin. They made their millionth piece in 1916, and they have some paper documents that show how many pieces they were, how many pieces they sold to make the $1 million. And it works out to something like $3 pieces for a nickel. Dime store ware, hotel ware, but you got to remember, I saw a thing on television last night. A 1931 Rolls Royce brought, when it was brand new, $1,400 in 1931. $1,400 today, yet then is $100,000 today. It's not a question of being worth more. Don't get me started. It's that the dollar bill in your pocket is only worth a cent. If you compare a 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath house with living room, dining room, kitchen in 1940 cost $5,000. The same house today costs $120,000. Is it really worth that? No, it's not. The house is worth the house. It's that the value of the dollar has dropped. And like I say, let's not go there. All that. Okay. Yeah.
Do they still make, is pottery, is this type of thing still made piece by piece with the rice paper and all?
Well,
today?
some do. Watching the film of Homer Laughlin is interesting because they make everything by machine. They make everything by machine, and they make 6 at a time. They have, this is a, oh, that's one thing I should tell you. This is a slip cast pitcher. This was, and this is restaurant ware, hotel ware. And this was cast in a block of plaster this big. It had a bottom, it had 2 sides, and it had a top. They came in along with a bucket and they poured the slip in. Nowadays, they come along with a hose, fill it up, fill the next one up. And then when they've left the slip in there the right length of time, then they come along with suction and suck it out. In the old days, you poured it out. You had some big strong guy who picked up the whole thing and he poured it back into a bucket, and the slip was used over again. Left a little shell of clay inside. They poured it in, they poured it out. The next guy comes down and he lays the mold on a side. The next guy comes along and he picks off the top. All the time that they're doing this, the mold is made of plaster of Paris. The plaster of Paris is absorbing water, and the air is absorbing water, and the piece is shrinking. And when they take the top off, it shrinks. Then they come along and they very carefully pick this clay thing up, and they set it on a board. The next guy comes along, and he picks up the board, puts the board on his shoulder, board on his head, and walks away with it. Potteries tended to be 4 stories high, which is stupid, but they were. And you get from one story to the next by climbing ladders. And these guys climbed the ladders, up the ladders, with these boards on their shoulders and head. And then they would offload them in a drying room. And they had to dry. All the time it's drying, got smaller and smaller. Bone china, which is the ware I know the best, in the course of making it, shrinks 11%. 11%. But that's the way slipcasts were made. But plates are made differently. Plates are made from pug clay. Pug clay comes out of a pug mill. And a pug mill, clay is ground up. The ingredients for the body are clay and feldspar and various things all together, and ground up in a ball mill. The ball is a big cylinder, has gears, and motor turns it around, steam engine turns it around, water wheel turns it around, something turns it around, and it has pieces of real hard porcelain balls. In the old days, stones, real hard stones. And that grinds up all the material. There's water in there, grind it up. They grind it up, they grind it up. And when it's all the slip is the right consistency. Then they suction out the water and they put it through a mill that compresses the body and presses out the water, and it comes out the end of the thing like a big sausage. And at Carborundum, the sausages were 2 feet long. We bought pug clay from England. Can you imagine? You have a pottery in America that's making English ware, and you don't mix the ware yourself. You import it from England. Why? Well, according to Hakluyt's voyages, Hakluyt wrote back to England and said, if you come to the New World and expect to find gold in the streets, you won't find it. But if you want iron, you'd better come, because there is more iron in America than anywhere we've ever seen. That is still true today. The problem in making china is they fire it in a reducing atmosphere. And iron that is colorless or white when it's mixed in the body, in the kiln, when it's fired in a reducing atmosphere, it turns black. And the ware looks like it has the measles, if you're lucky. No, if you're not lucky. If you're lucky, it only has 1 or 2 pieces of black in it. When you go to look at Parian porcelain made in the 1850s at Bennington, Vermont versus made in England, English ware has no black in it. Bennington has all sorts of little bitty white black specks. And so you can tell the Bennington ware from the English ware based on the black specks. Black specks are not desirable. At Carborundum, we found out that you couldn't use our water. In England, they store china clay outside. It rains, the water comes down, the water slurps around, and they need the clay. They pick it up with an iron shovel, and they put it in a wheelbarrow, and they take it into the clay factory, and out comes nice white body. Not in America. Too much iron. Just too much iron. So we had to import. They pugged it in England. They packed 2 pugs to a crate. They loaded it on an air freighter and shipped it to Niagara Falls. And it was cheaper to do it that way than it was trying to make it ourselves. Then they take the pug clay and they repug it, actually. And it comes out, and it comes out as a bat. The bat is about this big around, about so thick. And the jiggerman, the guy who makes the plate, is called a jiggerman because he has a jigger. He has this wheel, and the wheel has a mold on it, which is the shape of the inside of the plate. And it's up like this. And he takes this bat off and gets it in his hands, and he shoots around his hand and goes, boom, and he throws it down, whap, on top of this thing. And by throwing it on the piece, he drives all the air out of the top of the mold. And he sponges it at the same time to keep it lubricated, and that forms the bottom of the piece. Puts the jigger up, picks up the bat with its plaster bottom, sets it aside, and it dries, and then it falls off. Dries completely. Now, ware has to dry, oh, that's where I was going a while ago. Ware has to dry completely before it can be fired. It cannot have any moisture in it. It explodes in the kiln if it has moisture. It must be bone dry. And then, if you're making china or porcelain, bone china, you put it in the kiln and you fire it up to the highest temperature it'll take, and it vitrifies, and it comes out, and you have this wonderful bisque, unglazed bisque plate. We'll talk about plates. This is the best way to do it. Plate. And the inspectors look the plate over, and they say, oh, it's fine. Okay, we'll give it to Bill Steele. So Bill Steele gets a stack of plates, and he looks at the plates, and he grabs them, and he's the glazer. He's got a big tub of glaze, and he pushes this thing around and plops it, and he glazes the next one. The glaze is pink. The glaze is pink. The glaze is pink because it has red food coloring in it. They put red food coloring in. Why? Well, because it's white to begin with. You can't tell if it covers or not. If you put food coloring in it, you can tell if you've covered the plate completely. Then, after it dries, it's put back in the kiln and fired in a glaze kiln, the gloss kiln, as they say, and fired almost as high as the bisque was. In the process, the pink burns away, leaving it isn't white then. It melts and it becomes a clear glaze on the surface of the bone china. And when the firing cycle is over and the plates come out and it passes inspection again, then it goes to the transfer printer. Then it's fired up to its height, whatever that top temperature is. It comes back down and it cools off, and they have to re-inspect it. Then it goes to an artist who paints on enamel colors. Enamel colors are of 2 different temperatures, and so he paints on his colors, and it goes in the kiln again, and it's fired, each time it's fired at a lower temperature. Comes out, inspected, goes to the next guy. He puts in his enamel colors are on 2 different firing levels, and he puts it in, comes out that time, and it's inspected. Then it goes to the gilder, and he gilds it. Goes in, it's fired again, comes out. You wonder why Lenox is expensive. That's why it's expensive. It's fired bisque, gloss, cobalt, enamel, and gold, 6 times. This is fired twice. This is fired bisque, comes out of the kiln, inspected, goes directly to the decorators, and they put the decoration on, it's dried, and from there it's glazed, and it goes to the kiln again, comes out, and sold. 2 fires. That's why you have hotel wear, restaurant wear.
That's also because it's only 2 colors, right, sir? It's also fired twice only because there are 2 colors?
Yeah, probably only 1 color.
Okay.
See, that's one of the things that they achieved by having Glo-Tan, by having a colored body. They got 2 colors to say. The body is already tan. The body is tan and the decoration is blue. So, it was good wear, too. It was good wear. Steve?
How did they decide which decorations to put on which plates?
Based on what the salesman sells from the catalog to the customer. The customer picks the decoration he wants.
So they could basically custom make a plate, like what decoration?
Would they make a custom? Yeah, if they had a big enough order, they'd custom make.
Okay.
And if he's willing to pay for the decoration. Now, that's one of the things that happened with Lennox Incorporated. In 1946, at the end of World War II, Lennox had 30,000 open stock patterns. That seems dumb. Well, it was pretty dumb. But the way it got to happen is that the salesman would go into a jewelry store and say, would you carry our line? Well, what kind of deal can you cut me? Well, I don't know. Would you like a set of china? Yeah. Well, what would you like? Well, I like that. I like that chip china. I think that looks pretty nice. But you know that Warwick vase, that would look pretty in the middle of it. So they made this set for him like that. That's a separate pattern. And they were all open stock. Open stock means you can always get a piece for it. Well, in 46, they reduced the number of patterns of open stock from 30,000 to 10,000. It was still 10,000 patterns. But that's how that happens. And of course, the other question nobody's asked that I'll answer because you haven't asked, what if you got this stuff at home and you want 5 more pieces? How do you get 5 more pieces of a pottery that's defunct? You call 1-800-737-5223. And somebody answers the telephone and says, replacements limited. And boy, there's a good story. There's a guy who was a accounting major at the University of North Carolina and liked dinnerware. Of course, he didn't like one piece. He liked full sets. And he bought sets of china until his parents' house was full. And then, because he'd gotten a job working for the state of North Carolina as an accountant, he bought a house, and pretty soon that house was full. And pretty soon somebody said, you know, that's silly. You like the china so much, why don't you go into business? And they said, oh, you can't make a business selling. He says, I bet you can. I'll bet you can make money if you advertise right. So, do you remember where they ran their first ads? Yeah, anybody remember? They ran their first ads in Parade. Their first ads were in Parade, the highest circulation magazine in the country is what they ran their ads. And when the first ad went in, there were 4 of them working there. They automatically raised the staff to 25. And now if you go to Greensboro and stop at a replacements, they won't let you in their back room because their security wonks are all nuts. They won't let a museum curator back there. They're afraid I might steal something. I wouldn't steal anything, except maybe a piece of Carr. That ware room is the size of 4 football fields. They take in 4 or 5 semi-loads of ware a day. And they buy it from people. You can sell china to them all the time. And some of this, depending on what is desirable, what it sells, they'll keep. The rest they'll trash. And we have a friend working there, and he watches the trash boxes. And he yanks out certain things. He yanks out Payden City, for example. We get Payden City there. We get Homer Laughlin from there. we have an exhibit in the Capitol right now that's the donations of Commander Tom Zinn from Morgantown. He's given us over 300 objects since 1985. And he's one of the biggest donors. But the biggest donor is Replacements Limited. You know, when they published the big Homer Laughlin book, Dean Six called me up and said, Jim, we bought a bunch of stuff for the book that isn't saleable, and the powers that be want to trash it. And he said, I think it's a shame to trash this. A lot of this stuff is really rare. Would you like to have it? Well, at that time, we were under a do not collect order from the commissioner. I won't tell you which commissioner. So we couldn't collect it. I said, how much China is involved, Dean? He says, oh, it's not much. It's 12 banana boxes. I said, 12 banana boxes? Yeah, he said, that's 12 banana boxes without packing materials, solid China. Well, I said, will you sit on this stuff for me for a while? And he said, yeah, I got a place I can hide it. If you want it, you'll get it eventually. So I went down there in 2005 and gave a talk and brought 2 banana boxes full home in the car. And then my son and I got talking about it, and he says, Dad, I go by with a truck, go by there all the time. Why can't I just bring the other banana boxes full? And so he brought it home in the sleeper of an 18-wheeler. And one Saturday morning, his big tractor pulls up down here, and one of our guards looks and says, can I help you? And Nick looks up. JC's father looks down and says, yeah, I have a delivery for Jim Mitchell. He's not here. I know he's not here. He's going to be here in 10 minutes. Oh, and then he looks and he says, I'm his son. And Todd says, oh, that's good. So we unloaded. And we unloaded 8. Nick says, there's 8 banana boxes for the last 8. That's great. We got the last 8. And one day I called him up and said, you know those 8 boxes? He said, yeah. I said, we only got 7. What do you mean you only got 7? I took 8 out of there. I said, you may have, but I only got 7. He says, that's strange. How could a whole box disappear? I said, I don't know. What happened to it? About 2 days later, he called me back and he says, I found the box. I said, where was it? He was way back in the corner underneath the bed. He'd been sleeping on top of a box of china. So, yeah. I can go on and on. Any other questions? One last question from you. I won't take any more from you.
Right. So if you were to go into an antique store and you were looking for any of these pieces of china, would it be pretty rare that you'd find one? Or could you go into your average antique store?
To find Carr in any quantity today would be hard. To find odd pieces, you can see pieces. Let's see, have I seen Carr? Yeah, there's at least one piece of Sisters at Flatwoods right now. I don't know that I'd want it. We have so much, we don't want any, you know. Although, we want a piece of Ideal. When I did this talk, we pulled the Ideal cylinder up and looked at the list. Ideal, nowhere. We don't have a piece of Ideal, so we need a piece of Ideal. But I don't have a want list of it. I probably should. And then I tell Tom Zinn that I want it.
If someone walked into an antique store today and saw Carr China, what kind of prices?
Well,
like a plate?
I was at Back in Time Antiques in, that thing is uncomfortable. Back in Time Antiques at Fooey, what's her name? Not Jane Lou. Ann Moore. At Ann Moore, some years ago. And I was going to a conference, and there was a Paden City, part of a set, Paden City set. Paden City yellow. Now, my wife likes yellow. And on the way back, I bought it and took it home. That set cost me $30. $30 for 30 pieces, $1 a piece. And that's not bad. If you could get the lady to open, what's the name of the place? Tiny Tim's. Tiny Tim's in Canal City. There, the back room is filled with sets of china. There's some nice sets of china back there, but I don't know what you should be charging. The trouble with so many sets is if you buy it, where do you get pieces? If you think you're going to want a certain set, before you buy the set, call replacements and say, if I have a set of this, can I get replacements for it? And they'll tell you whether or not they carry it. There are a number of dinnerware patterns that are very popular, and people and you get replacements from them. But buying, and I think you could, if you saw a set of china in an antique shop you liked, you should buy it. By and large, this can be cheaper than buying a new set. You know.
When was Payton City in business?
When was Payton City in business? Payton City, interestingly enough, started in exactly the same year as Carr, 1916, and lasted until 1957. In 1957, they closed, and their building was bought by Corning. The idiots. I wasn't going to mention their name. They're a bunch of dum-dums. They made unbreakable ware.
Yeah.
They made that Corning Centura ware. Dumb idea. They lasted 30 years. They don't make it anymore. Why? We have 6 Corel fruit saucers in our kitchen. Drop one of those on the floor, and it goes boing, and you pick it up, put it in the dishwasher, and pour it. Dumb idea. Well, I'll tell you, the other thing is they made something called Centura ware, and their designer designed a creamer that was S-shaped like this. Well, you can't make an S-shape in Centura ware because it's made in a pressed glass press. In a press, it's pressed. It's pressed like glass and then fired like ceramics. And because it's a sophisticated body, you end up being unbreakable. But you couldn't make this piece. So they farmed the design out to Bay Ridge Specialty Company in Trenton, New Jersey. And Bay Ridge Specialty Company made these pitchers. Nice little pitchers, guaranteed unbreakable. You drop one of those on the floor, it goes crash. You take the pieces together, you take them to the dealer, and they give you another one. Oh, we're sorry, that must have been something wrong that one broke. It was nothing but white earthenware. But it had Centura right on the bottom. There's one in New Jersey State Museum that like that. I know, I put it in the museum myself. Yeah, the stories. Oh, I picked up some ware one time in Trenton from a woman whose family were the Perlee family. Perlee, P-E-R-L-E-E. Perlee Incorporated of Trenton. And they made dinnerware, and they claimed to have made better dinnerware than Lennox. They did. And I went in, she said, now you know our ware is better. And I said, is it? She said, yes, watch this. So she goes to the kitchen, and she gets a Mansfield plate. She says, see, Lennox. I said, right. Goes like this, and it hits the living room floor, goes crash. She says, easy come, Ikuzo. Now watch this. And she throws the Perlee plate on the plate and goes, barong, 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 and it stops. She said, see, unbreakable. They lasted 6 years. Don't make unbreakable ware. That's like this automobile company in Germany that made these wonderful, wonderful cars. And they made them so good that people normally didn't trade them in because they were bad. They traded them in because they were tired of them. Mercedes-Benz is not today, but 20 years ago, they were so good there was no point trading them in. They just went forever and ever. And then that funny one, you ever walk past the back of Clay Center, drive past the back of Clay Center, sitting right there, there's a old gray Mercedes-Benz. That car will never die. That car is bulletproof. That was made for a bank president. It has armor plate on it and bulletproof windows. And Tom Passanetti owns it. And funny stories. Anything else? Yes. What's that? McNichol Martin comes after McNichol itself, and McNichol went out of business shortly after Carr, and then that was one of the attempts to revive McNichol. It lasted about 4 years in the 70s, and then didn't make it. Couldn't compete with the Orient, or couldn't compete with Homer Laughlin, one of the two. I sometimes think the dinnerware factories in America have gone under, not because of European competition, but because of competition in Newell, West Virginia, you know, who really learned how to make ware.
We have time for one more question, if anybody has one. If not,
Oh, thank you. Got to teach everybody how to bow right. You're supposed to keep your face down. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Watch all those dancers, Scottish dancers, and they bow like this. They're supposed to bow with their face down. Huh?
Good, very good.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, right.
Good job.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Fascinating.
It is, yeah. Yeah.